I'm Cobalt Black, and I am 1/3 of the world's greatest Temtem Swarm co-op team that has ever existed. Is that true? I don't know. We just kind of said it one day and nobody said no, so yeah, take that with a grain of salt. And while we're on that note, that's how most things that claim they're the best are. There's not like a review board sitting around for every weird little thing in the world, so, you know, maybe take those things with a grain of salt too. But have I played a crap load of Temtem Swarm with and without these guys? Yes. I am 75 hours in, and I absolutely love this game. And after 75 hours, I have learned a lot of things. I've seen what people have trouble with, and the grind is real. So I decided to make this tips and tricks video to A, cover some of those things people might not have gotten from the tutorials in the game, and B, hopefully help you guys cut through a little bit of that grind so that you can get on to enjoying the game. So your first tip number 10, understand what happens when you prestige. Prestiging Tems was added in 1.0, and I see a lot of confusion on what exactly prestiging does, and why you should, and then sometimes shouldn't do it. Prestiging does different things depending on how many times you've prestiged a Tem. On your first prestige, you gain the most. The Tem now gets a prestige individual passive. This can be pretty large boost. Like in the case of Inky here, he now has a 43% chance for his ult to recharge immediately. That's substantial. I've been able to use my ult as many as 9 times in a row because of this. They also gain a prestige global bonus. This is usually something smaller, but it affects every Tem on your account. This can be things like Venx's plus 10% EXP modifier. Getting 10% more EXP on any Tem you bring into a match is huge. And finally, your first win after prestiging for the first time unlocks the Luma, or shiny variant of a Tem. The second prestige increases that Tem's individual passive by a small amount, maybe 2% or something like that, and this will happen for every subsequent prestige all the way to 10. But more important, on the second prestige, you unlock the Umbra variant. Now, this one just makes your Tems all shadowy. In my opinion, the Luma looks better since there's actual design, but this is an unlock nonetheless, and it's pretty cool. You can prestige up to 10 times fully. Again, the only thing you gain after your second prestige every time is a little bit extra on your prestige individual passive that you've gained from your first one. This can add up and make your Tems substantially more powerful by the end, but prestiging 10 times is a very, very tall order. So I wouldn't recommend this unless this is the only game you play or you have one Tem you really just want to be the greatest thing ever. Tip number 9, focus on unlocking all the Tems. Make unlocking the full roster of Tems in this game your priority early. Don't just stick with whoever you started with and grind them into the ground before you branch out. You're going to need to play every Tem eventually if you're serious about the prestige system, and the sooner you get the full roster, the better your decision making is going to be. Build planning and prestige order all gets clearer once you know what you're working with. Treat unlocking as its own goal in the early hours. Not something you get around to eventually, but something you intently go for originally. The game opens up a lot faster when you do. And don't forget to use each Tem after you unlock it. This helps unlock new techniques and new gear that can help you build all of your Tems and make them much more powerful. Tip 8, read the Tem's ability before you lock in. This sounds obvious until you're on your 3rd or 4th Tem and realize you've been playing it completely wrong. Some of these abilities are subtle and some of them fundamentally change how you prioritize building your Tem. For instance, on Kinu, I always take the item that gives more revives. You might say, why? Kinu already has the most revives in the game and even starts with one before any skill tree investment. Well, it's easy. Kinu gets plus 5% max health every time he revives. This helps me use my ult a lot more because the ult uses health. And the thing about Kinu is his ult can often be his greatest source of damage, basically clearing the entire screen whenever it's used. So that extra 5% health can really add up. Tip 7. If you played Survivor Likes before, this tip will seem basic, but I see people doing this wrong all the time, so I had to put it on this list. Tip 7 is about magnets. If you're not sure what those are, they're items that pull all the experience or pan suns on the map towards you, which is how you level up mid-run and make sure you have all the meta progression currency before you leave a run. Early on, it's tempting to pop them as soon as you see them. Don't. Save them. If you got a read on the run and think you're going to make it a while longer, magnets used at the right moment, right when you're drowning in gems and about to hit several level ups in a row, are dramatically more valuable than using them the moment the screen gets a little bit cluttered. If a boss is about to kill you, yeah, pop it. But if you're comfortable, wait. Also, if you're in multiplayer and sharing XP, carefully watch for magnets being picked up by your teammates. If you both just got magnets and one of you uses theirs, save the other one. It'll come in handy later. Tip 6, 100% isn't always better. Don't don't assume a fully completed Tem is automatically your strongest option. This one tripped me up for a while. I mean, seriously, like, I fully realized the mistake I was making yesterday. There's a node near the end of most skill trees that unlocks a whole new category of moves for that Tem, usually by type. For example, Ori has a node that gives you electric moves on this Tem, and that sounds great on paper. More options, more variety. The problem is that all it's really doing is throwing more techniques into your pool, and the bigger pool means less consistency. Now you're pulling from a wider selection of possible pickups mid-run, which means that specific techniques you might need or want for your build are going to be harder to find. The synergy you're cooking gets diluted by options you didn't really want or ask for, and then you're using up your bans to get rid of them when you could have been banning other things. So before you dump points into that final unlock, ask whether you want what it's adding. Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes your Tem was already doing exactly what you needed to do, and that node just introduces noise. Completion for its own sake isn't strategy, but also know that with some Tems, specifically, well, I'm gonna mention him again, Ori. Yes, he has a node that unlocks electric moves, and I wouldn't take that node because most of my builds don't use those moves. However, the node after it unlocks 2 extra technique slots, so Ori is a real catch-22 with this node. Other Tems, these nodes are split up, and it's very easy to think about how you want to handle this, but some Tems, it's more situational. Tip number 5, the skill tree nodes that unlock extra gear slots, extra ability slots, and shutdown nodes. Prioritize those every time. You see why I mentioned Ori and why the previous tip and this one kind of are contentious with certain Tems. But these are non-negotiable nodes. More slots means more options mid-run, which means more synergies, which means more damage or more survivability. And shutdown nodes specifically make things easier. This node is an execute. Once fully leveled, this will automatically kill enemies when they're under 15% HP, excluding bosses and mini-bosses. But this drastically increases the effectiveness of dots, of statuses like poison, and can help when you're just starting out your skill tree and can only almost one-shot enemies. The mistake I see is people dumping early skill points into stat bumps because the number going up feels good. The slots matter more. Get the slots. Tip 4, prestige every Tem. This is kind of going back to tip number 10. You're going to be reluctant to do this at first because prestige resets a Tem you've worked on and makes them temporarily weak. Push through that. Okay? The permanent unlocks from prestige are how the game's long-term power scaling works, and if you're not prestiging, you're leaving a massive amount of power on the table. I told you about those prestige global passives and the prestige individual passives. Those are extremely important, okay? You are going to be weaker for a short period of time, yeah, and that's going to tie into a tip later, but we'll get to that. Now, I'm not saying prestige every Tem the full 10 times. That's kind of ridiculous, and again, I would reserve that for if this is the only game you play. But prestige them all each once, so that you unlock that prestige global passive, because even if it's a Tem you're not playing, 10% extra HP or 10% extra experience on the Tems you do play is extremely helpful when going through any of these matches and can help you push way further in Endless. Now, the individual passive is also important if it is a Tem you do play a lot, because again, Inky's power went up so much when I could just spam his ult like it was a regular technique. Tip number 3 connects directly to the prestige weakness. Always make sure that you have at least one strong Tem on your roster at any given time. Preferably, this strong Tem should have never been prestiged. Hear me out. This is a bit confusing, but it makes sense at the end. When you prestige a Tem, they can now only gain Pansuns for themselves, and they can only use their specifically dedicated Pansuns. That means in order to make a prestige Temtem stronger, you have to use them. You cannot use another Tem and give them Pansuns. You have to use the specific Tem. So if you're prestiging one by one, like most people are, I do know some people who prestige everything the first time at once, and this tip doesn't apply to them. But if you're prestiging one by one, always make sure you have an unprestiged Tem that is fairly strong and can carry through runs and push into Endless. This is so you can A, farm Pansuns for the other unprestiged Tem you have. Maybe if it's a Tem you don't really want to play, but you would like to get that prestige global passive for, then this is the way I get them. I keep one guy who's really strong and can give them Pansuns. And on top of that, if you play multiplayer, it's always good to have one very strong Tem. This could be prestiged or not prestiged, but one Tem that can carry you into Endless and help out your buddies, because carry sharing is a thing that happens often in multiplayer, and I think it's a really important part of the community. It's great to be able to pop in with your strong Tem, help your buddies get their weaker Tem stronger, and then the next round, they use their strong Tem. Tip number 2, stop skipping the hacking modifiers. I get it, they look scary. They make the game harder, but that's the point, guys. They dramatically increase your rewards, and if you're trying to build Pansun reserves, and unlock things efficiently, playing on the base difficulty is just slower. You don't have to stack every modifier at once, but picking one or two that you know you can manage around is always worth it. Get comfortable with the ones that affect the experience before you try to stack 3 at once, but don't ignore the system entirely. The most common ones I use are Hasty and Endless. Hasty allows matches to be faster, and thus you ultimately get more Pansuns, and Endless allows the match to continue on, so less loading screens through farming more. Do be careful though. Hasty means more enemies spawn at once, and Endless increases the difficulty every 10 minutes. But the rewards are much higher. And tip number 1, if the game's kicking you in the teeth solo, try co-op. This sounds obvious, but I genuinely think a lot of people bounce off Swarm solo before they ever experience what the game actually feels like when you have a team that can build synergies together. Coordinating gear and abilities with even one person changes the run completely. Something to note about co-op is that if one Tem has the synergistic gear for one of your techniques and it's not you, you probably won't be able to find that gear, but you will still be able to evolve your technique as long as anyone on the team has the synergistic gear, which is huge. I've seen some runs where people will just pick up some very important gear and it frees up gear for me to take, and then I can do a whole new build with a Tem that I have never thought of before because I no longer need those synergy gears because somebody else has them. This can backfire. Some techniques actually synergize with the gear, like effect wise, and others just synergize on paper where you need that gear to evolve them. They don't necessarily play off of each other well, but if they do, then that can backfire. If they don't play off each other well, then that's great. You don't have to take that gear your build didn't need, and you can still evolve that skill. And if you don't have anyone to play with, the Temtem Discord has an active community for exactly this. I'll have the link in the description. I'll also have the link to my Discord, which has a Temtem Swarm section that you guys can join, hop into LFG, and see who's around and see if they want to play a couple rounds with you. That's it. That's my 10 tips for starting Temtem Swarm. There's more to dig into, build specific stuff, level strategies. So if you want that kind of detail, let me know in the comments what you're struggling with, and I'll try to cover it. Oh, and here's one bonus tip that I think everybody needs to know. The game isn't super clear on this, and you might think the opposite because this is just a survivor-like and not a monster tamer. However, type advantages still apply in this game. So yes, Crystal is still weak to fire. Your Tems are still essentially fighting all of the Tems that swarm you in missions. This is true and also not true. It's true in that the type advantages matter and it can make runs easier or harder. However, I'm gonna tell you right now, you can still beat the first level with a water Tem even though most of the Temtems in the swarm are electric type. Your move's power just kind of overwhelms things. However, it will be harder. So keep that in mind. There's definitely been a few times where I was struggling with beating a map, and then I looked at the Tems that spawned and what kind of types they were weak to and swapped my Tem to be advantageous, and it helped out a lot. I see it mostly affecting the damage you take rather than the damage they take. You're always kind of going to be strong enough to cut through the swarm, but if you are playing on Inky and you are on a level where everything is earth, both crystal and electric are weak to earth. Inky is 4 times weak to earth, so when he gets touched, he explodes on those levels. Don't get me wrong, he can still cut through everything like a hot knife through butter. It's Inky, he's a monster. But on those levels, I changed to something else because I'm tired of having to dodge even the smallest of mobs. If you made it this far in the video, a like and a sub would be greatly appreciated. I'm trying to grow the channel right now and every little bit helps. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. I stream on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, so stop by and say hi. And as always guys, I'll be back later with another video. Peace out.